We are under attack by alien invaders in Sector 412.
I really wanted to like this game. Robotech Battlecry starts off with 4 solid missions in its first chapter. The controls for the game are also pretty solid when it comes to combat and switching between the different Veritech modes. Press left on the D-pad for Battlelord mode, up for Guardian mode, and right for Fighter mode. Simple, quick, and easy. This game also stands out from most mech games, as most of the levels actually feel like levels instead of being in some squared grid arena with invisible walls. And the visuals still hold up because the graphics are cel-shaded. As for the cutscenes, I wasn't too much of a fan of them when I was younger, as they're just picture stills with some narration on top. But that was before I played Ace Combat 4, which told its story in a similar way. So now I actually kinda like them. If we stop the video right here, Robotech Battlecry could quite possibly be considered S tier among all the other mech games of its time. So why isn't it? What happened?
The town is under attack. All citizens have been evacuated to the Civic Center. Get over there and protect them.
Well, the cracks begin to show in Chapter 2 when we encounter our first defense mission in Trouble in Greystone. This is the second mission of the chapter, and the objective is to defend the stadium in the middle against waves of enemies. Overall, this isn't all that bad once you get the hang of things. The issue is that enemies will spawn from opposite sides of the map, forcing you to quickly move back and forth as fast as you can. And then there's the fact that it only takes a few shots for the stadium to be destroyed, and thus causing you to fail and repeat the mission.
Stay focused, Wolf 10.
Not long after, there's also the Special Delivery mission, which is an escort mission. Not exactly the worst, and also not as bad as the previous mission. Really, the only issue is that you had to wait for the defense targets to get to their destinations.
We're getting out of here. We'll try to swing back later after things have settled down.
Glad you could join us.
The following mission, This Droid's in Danger, is another defense mission. Again, not the worst, and not as bad as Trouble in Greystone was. And really, that's about the worst for the missions in Chapter 2.
Now try flying sober.
There are 8 missions in total, and only 3 that could be considered problematic. The game is still fairly playable at this point, and it's at least still in A tier. But then comes Chapter 3, which has a total of 14 missions, 9 of which have some form of defense, escort, or stealth elements incorporated into them. Deadly Storm, Graveyard, and Enemy Within are more boss battles than defense, so we'll let those slide, since there's only one enemy to worry about, and to be honest, they are pretty fun. Therefore, 6 missions in total that can be considered problematic. That's almost half of the entire chapter. The first of these is Call to Arms, which isn't too bad. We're okay so far. Just don't mess up too bad and listen to the objectives given to you. The next is Power Struggle. I guess we can categorize this one as a form of tower defense, since the objective is to destroy all the ships trying to escape the area. The problem is that there are a lot of enemies shooting at you trying to prevent you from getting to the targets. And if only just one of these manage to escape the map, it's an immediate mission fail. Start the entire thing over again. Aside from having a minimap that only shows nearby enemies, there's no way of knowing if an enemy target slipped past you. You just have to trust that you managed to catch all the enemies trying to escape. Then there's the next 2 defense missions, CAT Scan and Trial by Fire. CAT Scan is okay, not exactly terrible, so long as you remember that the best defense is a good offense. But Trial by Fire can burn up in the atmosphere and never see the light of day again, as far as I'm concerned. This is the first of several missions that can feel nearly impossible to complete. As with CAT Scan, you have to defend a friendly target, but Trial by Fire leaves you out in the open. Oftentimes, there's a 50-50 chance that the target will be destroyed, or you'll be the one to die. And the next mission is no better. Daring Rescue has you lead some friendlies through a city with enemy snipers. And lastly, there's Little Mesa Massacre. This starts off as a stealth mission, requiring you to snipe at enemy tactical recon battle pods at the start of the mission. Seems easy enough on paper, except for the part where, if they even catch a glimpse of you from the corner of their eyes, they will call for help and you'll have to restart the mission. That's also not the entire mission. There's also another part where you have to move further into the map. So if you fail that second part of the mission, then guess what? You have to go right back to the beginning and snipe again. With all that being said, we're now down to B tier. It would be lower were it not for some fun moments spread throughout the chapter. But then we have Chapter 4. And I'm afraid it doesn't get much better. This chapter also has 14 missions. The only upside is that there are slightly less defense missions, but it makes up for that in the worst way possible by having 2 of the worst in the entire game. The first 2 missions, Goodbye Greystone and Narrow Escape, are defense and escort missions. And even if they're not the worst, by this point in the game's campaign, it all begins to feel like more of the same. So much so that you may even begin to dread whatever the next mission is going to be. Sure, there could be a 30% chance that it'll be a fun mission, but then there's the other 70% that it'll be some form of defense or escort mission. The next mission that really hurts this game's overall score and perhaps even its reputation is Burning Bridge, another defense mission. At this point, I don't even know why they called it Robotech Battlecry, when they should have just called it Robotech Endless Defense. Or actually, Robotech Defense Force would have been more appropriate for the game's title. I'm well aware that games in the 90s and early 2000s were often made to be more difficult than they had to be, so that kids wouldn't be able to beat them in a single weekend after their parents rented them the game at their local Blockbuster or other rental store. But this is taking it to another level. To make it even worse, Burning Bridge should be a fun mission. It could have been, anyway, if it weren't for the bridge that you need to worry about. Let us play the game for crying out loud.
Quit fooling around and get back to work.
Later on, there's also the Cat and Mouse mission, which is another escort mission. I'm not even gonna waste my time with it. Let's move on. Stormy Friendship then follows, and this is very much a I quit mission for a lot of people. It's again, surprise surprise, another defense mission. Except this time, there is a ludicrous number of enemies rushing your position, and you will most certainly fail multiple times. Just like with Trial by Fire, either the defense target is gonna be destroyed or you're gonna die. And now, we're down to C tier.
Quit fooling around and get back to work.
Again, it would be lower were it not for some fun missions scattered around. Finally, there's Chapter 5. 6 missions in total. Thankfully, only 1 defense mission here. And much like with Burning Bridge, I wish I could like this mission. I want to like this mission. It has the makings of a great mission as you fight off waves of enemies on the ground and in the air. But there's 2 defense targets that you need to worry about. I just can't with this anymore. But to be fair, this game does also have some great stuff scattered throughout its 5 chapters. So it stays in C tier.
But is it, like, you think it's okay? It's clean?
It is acceptable.
Now, there is a way to help improve the game a little. Although I'm not really in favor of using cheat codes in games since they sort of defeat the purpose of ever playing the games in the first place. In this case, however, they might be the only way to help keep you interested. Before selecting story mode in the main menu, hold down L1 and R1 and press left, up, down, X, right, triangle, and then start. This will open up the cheat menu. The only codes I would recommend to you are Miria, so you can refresh your gun pod and missiles faster.
That sure is a big tuna fish.
And the second one is only as a last resort. Only do this once you are close to having your I quit moment. The code is Backstabber. This will give you one-shot kills with the gun pod. When you're fighting off multiple waves of enemies, this works in terms of keeping the gameplay fun. The downside is that this also applies to bosses, meaning all enemy fights get trivialized, sort of like having the infinite rocket launcher in Resident Evil 3. So when it comes to fighting against bosses, I recommend going back to the cheat code menu and enter clear in order to get rid of all the cheat codes. Like I said, I really wanted to like this game. It actually has a lot of good stuff going for it, and I do enjoy some of it. I would even argue that the game's story is actually more interesting than the show itself. The Robotech show, I mean, not Macross. Looking at how chapters 1, 2, and 5 are the strongest in the game and also the shortest, it seems that all the defense and escorting missions were intended to make the campaign longer. And the 14 missions for chapters 3 and 4 each reflect that. They're the longest chapters in the game, and they're the ones that really drag down the quality of the game. There were also some other questionable decisions in this game, such as with the extra missile armor you can select for your Veritech. It greatly improves your stats for space combat, but you have to unlock it by completing some of the game's challenges. Except by the time you do unlock it, you'll almost be done with the entire campaign, and it's only available for space. And yet, there's only 6 space missions in the entire game. There's also the Armored Veritech for the ground you can unlock later on as well, but that can only be used in versus mode. That's really all I have to say about this game. It's not the worst by any means, but definitely a flawed game that could have been great, held back by some questionable decisions, mostly defense missions. Anyway, that's it for me. See you all in the next video, and don't forget to watch Macross.